Remember when Samsung introduced the Galaxy S9 as the world's first smartphone with a variable aperture camera? It was marketed as a breakthrough in mobile photography, a camera lens that could physically adjust like a human eye. Now, nearly a decade later, history may be repeating itself. But this time, it's Apple preparing to step into the world of true optical innovation with the iPhone 18 Pro and iPhone 18 Pro Max. According to multiple supply chain reports, Apple is preparing to introduce a variable aperture main camera on its 2026 flagship iPhones. What once sounded like speculation is now looking increasingly real, with concrete evidence pointing toward active manufacturing and early production planning. Reports from ET News and industry insiders suggest that Chinese optical giant Sunny Optical, along with Luxshare ICT, has already begun manufacturing actuators for Apple's upcoming variable aperture camera system. These actuators are the key mechanical components that physically move the aperture blades inside the lens, a major shift from Apple's traditionally software-driven photography approach. LG Innotek, Apple's longtime camera module partner, is reportedly responsible for assembling the new camera modules. Mass production is expected to begin as early as June or July, months ahead of the iPhone 18 Pro launch window. Even more telling, specialized equipment for building variable aperture modules has already been installed at LG Innotek's Gumi plant in South Korea. This isn't a last-minute experiment. This is preparation. But what exactly is a variable aperture camera, and why does it matter for the iPhone 18 Pro? In simple terms, a variable aperture allows the camera lens to physically control how much light enters the sensor. Inside the lens, tiny metal blades open and close, just like the pupil of your eye. In low-light environments, the blades open wider to let in more light. In bright conditions, they narrow to reduce exposure and preserve detail. Most smartphones today use fixed apertures. They rely heavily on computational photography to simulate depth, manage exposure, and enhance low-light shots. Apple has mastered this approach with features like Smart HDR, Night Mode, and Deep Fusion. But a variable aperture introduces something software alone cannot replicate: real, physical light control. This could dramatically improve image quality across multiple scenarios. In bright daylight, a narrower aperture could help preserve highlights, reduce overexposure, and increase sharpness across the frame. In low light, a wider aperture would allow more natural light capture, potentially reducing noise and reliance on aggressive post-processing. There's also a major benefit for depth control. A variable aperture can create more natural background, blur, true optical bokeh, rather than relying entirely on software-based portrait effects. That means more realistic separation between subject and background. Macro photography could also see improvements. By adjusting aperture size, the camera can better manage focus depth when shooting close-up subjects. This may lead to sharper, more detailed macro shots without excessive digital enhancement. What makes this particularly interesting is Apple's timing. Apple typically perfects technologies before adopting them. The company rarely rushes into hardware changes that require complex mechanical engineering. Unlike software updates, which can be patched post-launch, mechanical components must work flawlessly from day one. That explains why actuator production is reportedly starting early. Variable aperture systems involve moving parts, and moving parts introduce engineering challenges: durability, reliability, precision, and long-term wear. Apple's decision to begin manufacturing months in advance signals serious intent. If implemented successfully, the iPhone 18 Pro and Pro Max could represent the biggest camera hardware leap Apple has made in years. For the past several iPhone generations, improvements have largely centered around sensor size increases, computational photography upgrades, and AI-based image processing. While those changes have been impressive, they've remained evolutionary rather than revolutionary. A variable aperture system would be different. It would mark Apple's shift toward combining computational photography with true optical physics. The big question is whether this will be a meaningful upgrade for everyday users or simply a marketing headline. For casual users posting to social media, the difference may not always be obvious. Instagram compression hides many subtle improvements, But for enthusiasts, content creators, and photographers who rely on iPhones for serious work, the impact could be substantial. Better highlight control, improved dynamic range, more natural, depth of field, stronger low-light performance, reduced reliance on artificial background blur. These are tangible advantages. If Apple succeeds, competitors will almost certainly follow. Samsung pioneered variable aperture in smartphones with the Galaxy S9 but later moved away from it. Rumors already suggest that Samsung could revisit the technology in the future Galaxy S27 Ultra. Meanwhile, Chinese manufacturers like Xiaomi and Huawei continue pushing camera hardware innovation with large sensors and adjustable optics. Apple, entering the variable aperture space, could reignite a hardware-focused camera race across the industry. It's also worth noting that Apple tends to influence design trends once it adopts them. When Apple embraces a technology, accessory makers, app developers, and even competitors often respond. A successful implementation in the iPhone 18 Pro could normalize variable aperture as a premium flagship standard. Of course, execution will be everything. The system must be fast, silent, durable, and seamlessly integrated into Apple's camera app. Users shouldn't have to think about aperture adjustments. The intelligence behind the scenes, likely powered by Apple's next-generation A-series chip and advanced image signal processing, will need to decide instantly how wide or narrow the aperture should be in every scenario. If Apple manages that balance between hardware precision and software intelligence, the iPhone 18 Pro and iPhone 18 Pro Max could deliver the most advanced camera system ever seen on an iPhone. After years of refining computational photography, Apple may finally be ready to embrace real optical mechanics in a big way. The iPhone camera might be about to learn how to squint, and that could change mobile photography all over again.